I'm Donna Troca, Associate Director of Teaching and Pedagogy at Emory University's Center for Faculty Development and Excellence, or CFDE. I also teach American Studies and Interdisciplinary Studies in Emory College.
I'm Daniel Yu, Dean's Teaching Fellow at the CFDE and PhD candidate in Comparative Literature at Emory University. Today we're going to go through our Teaching 101 series. We'll focus on strategies and resources for faculty who have limited experience teaching at the university level. This series is broken down into 4 parts: what you teach, how you teach, assessments and assignments, and creating a syllabus.
Daniel will talk about the first 2 parts, and I'll talk about the last 2. And just a reminder, this is not everything you need to know about teaching, but instead the beginning of a conversation. Let's get started.
Teaching 101, what you teach. One of the first things to think about when you're teaching is what you will be teaching. In other words, what is the course's subject matter? Certainly, you'll want to get a clear sense of where your course fits in the curriculum of your department and the university as a whole. This will give you an idea of the typical level of preparation your students will have and what you'll be responsible for teaching them. Next, you'll have to think about what you most want your students to get out of the course. Is it more important for them to develop certain skills or to acquire knowledge of the material? Sometimes students will need more background knowledge before they can practice the skills. On the other hand, sometimes the best way to learn is by doing. Depending on your approach, you might front-load the beginning of the term with introductory materials, or you might teach your students to perform tasks of increasing complexity as the semester progresses. Another pair of concerns to balance is breadth versus depth. Is it very important to have complete coverage of the content area you're teaching? If so, you can plan on reviewing materials that students find particularly challenging. Alternatively, you can take a more focused approach, delving deeply into a specific topic. Here, you might consider whether it would be helpful to integrate your research with your teaching. Your class will benefit from your passion for and expertise in your area, and students can benefit tremendously from being a part of an ongoing scholarly conversation. Finally, if you're teaching a range of materials, think about whether representation is important to you. Do you want to have materials from authors of various genders, ethnicities, or viewpoints? The selection of materials that you use signals to your students who the authoritative voices in the field are and can shape what they think of the discipline. The basics of how you teach your material will be largely determined by where you teach, who you're teaching, and for how long. It may be a good idea as early as you can to scope out the room you're assigned. If you have a large class, you may be in an auditorium. Walk the aisles and get a sense of how far the back of the room is from the front. If you decide to lecture, think about breaking up long lectures into chunks with active learning breaks in between. You might talk for 15 minutes and then have your students engage in a think, pair, share activity. You would pose a question or problem, have the students work individually on a solution for a short period of time, and then pair up with a neighbor to discuss their conclusions. In wrapping this up, you might solicit volunteers to explain their collaboratively generated ideas or solutions to the class. Activities like small group work and responding to polls help students retain information, apply it to specific situations, and evaluate different approaches to a problem. If you're teaching a smaller class, you have the opportunity to foster more intimate discussions and conversations. To aid in that, consider arranging the furniture in your room to encourage the kind of participation you want. Even if speech is your preferred medium, you might not want to completely disregard visual aids like paper handouts or writing on a board. Having something written down also helps the conversation to stay on topic. You may discover that certain students are always ready to offer a thought or opinion, while others hardly ever talk. You should be attentive to the social dynamics and demographics of your class if you're interested in creating an equitable space. Consider pausing after you ask a question and taking the time to make a deliberate decision about whose voice you promote. You might also try having your class write 1-minute papers before asking them for their thoughts. Many students have a lot to say but need some time to collect their ideas.
Teaching 101, Assessments and Assignments. A big part of teaching is assessing whether or not your students are achieving your learning objectives. Depending on what type of class you're teaching, this can mean tests and quizzes, or term papers and group projects. Regardless of type of assessment, it's important that you have multiple assessments and assignments throughout a semester so that students have continuous feedback from you about their performance. Avoid giving just a midterm and a final, as both are incredibly high-stakes assignments. And instead, try to include weekly or bi-weekly quizzes or assessments. This way, no one assessment or assignment can ruin a student's grade, and your students are more likely to retain what they've learned instead of simply cramming and dumping knowledge. You also want to always keep your learning objectives in mind when developing an assessment or assignment. If you're interested in measuring whether or not your students know the important figures and dates of a social movement, you may want to create a multiple choice quiz or test. But if you want your students to compare and contrast the strategies of the civil rights movement and the women's movement, you may want to assign a term paper. You also want to keep in mind the size of your class as you are creating your assignments and assessments. Grading essay tests and term papers is incredibly time-consuming, so unless you have a team of TAs to help you, you may not want to assign either of these with a class larger than 25. If you do assign a term paper with a large class, you may want to scaffold the assignment. That is, break it into smaller pieces, such as an abstract, topic proposal, an annotated bibliography, and a first draft. This way, you have seen aspects of the paper many times before you're expected to give it a final grade. This will help guide the student as they complete the paper, as well as lighten your grading load at the end of the semester. For more resources on this, see the CFDE's website. Teaching 101, creating a syllabus. There's not one correct way to write a syllabus. Some schools or departments have syllabus templates, so when you begin to create your syllabus, check and see if you need to start with a template. Your syllabus should include your information, email address, office location, and office hours. It should also include your course description, course objectives, weekly reading or viewing schedule, and assignments and assessments. You also want to make sure you add a statement about accommodations from the Office of Accessibility Services, or OAS, as well as the Honor Code. Lastly, some faculty include a Title IX statement and guidelines for the use of technology in your class, cell phones, laptops, etc. When creating the actual format of the syllabus, aim for accessibility and use universal design. If you pass out a hard copy of the syllabus, post a digital copy as well, so that students can increase the font or use a screen reader if they need to. A great place to start is Tulane's Accessible Syllabus. Here you will find some best practices for how to present the text of your syllabus. On the left, you will see an example of what many syllabi look like, large blocks of text on the page with almost no white space. On the right, you'll see the same text presented in 2 columns with much more white space. This example is easier to read for everyone, not just people with vision impairment. Work toward arranging the text of your syllabus throughout so that it's easy to read and easy to discern the most important parts, using boldface, italics, or bullet points. You may also want to consider creating an interactive syllabus. This is a living document that can include links to readings or websites or even video clips. You can do this in a learning management system like Canvas, or make a simple website for your class on WordPress or Scholar Blogs, which is specific to Emory. For more information on how to do this on Canvas and a few examples using Canvas and WordPress, visit these websites.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Feel free to contact us with questions at cfde.emory.edu.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.